because the Fed's independence was under question and Trump was in a box. How do I repair the damage? Well, I think they put on a show with Kevin Walsh and say, hey, let's put this guy in as the Fed chair who's a hawk. And he's going to talk about how tough he's going to be and how he's going to raise rates. And so when he ends up not raising rates or cutting rates, it won't look like, you're controlling it, even though that's the plan they've got all along. Because I don't believe Trump would have given Walsh the job if he expected him to be another Paul Volcker. That's the last thing he wants, because that's worse in his mind than what we had with Powell. And Powell's a moron, Powell's an idiot, too late, Powell. He's going to actually appoint somebody that's going to be even later, that's even a bigger idiot than Powell, because according to him, the reason Powell was so dumb is because he wasn't cutting rates. Well, neither is Walsh, at least for now. So by the time he gets around to cutting rates, it won't look as political. It'll be like, hey, this is actually the independent assessment of the Fed. It's not because of pressure from the White House or Trump, right? Because, he's a very independent guy. He's a hawk. And the fact that he's cutting rates must mean that these rate cuts are appropriate. Right? It's an independent decision, but they're not going to be appropriate. In fact, rates are still too low. The Fed should have hiked rates at their last meeting, and 25 basis points isn't even enough. If Walsh were really serious, he would have already done something. He wouldn't have set up 5 task forces to basically bide him some time while he does nothing. Meanwhile, look at money supply growth is really accelerating. Look at M2. Look at the Fed's balance sheet. The Fed is creating inflation. It's trying to distract the markets by pretending it's going to get tough and fight inflation. But in the meantime, it is creating inflation. And I think the metals markets are going to start to appreciate this. In fact, gold, which did make a new low intra-week, it got below 4,000 again a couple of times. It had a nice rally today in response to the weak jobs market. We closed the week above 4,000, in fact, above 4,100, 4,118.50. So a nice turnaround, about an $88 rally in the price of gold. I really think 4,000 is the support. In fact, we may not trade below 4,000 again. We'll see. We traded below it a couple of times, but this was very bullish news because it does push those rate hikes further into the future, if they ever occur at all. And I would be surprised if we ultimately get them. Again, I think we're setting up for cuts and a ramp up in QE. Silver, the same thing. It made new lows, but it closed back above 60. $1.74 gain on the day at $60.72. So I think we're going to see some continued strength in the metals as people start to appreciate the fact that the Fed is all talk, that they're not going to be able to walk the walk when it comes to inflation fighting because the economy is too fragile. The job market is fragile. The bond market, the housing market is a disaster just right before our eyes. And so the Fed is going to be under all sorts of political pressure, especially as we're coming closer to the midterm elections. Trump is trying to do what he can to control the damage. He's got this ceasefire from the MOU with Iran that really doesn't end the war. They're trying to bide some time. They're trying to get the oil price down by reopening the strait. But oil prices are not going to stay down. As I said, right now we're back below $70. But they're not going to stay there. This is just some short-term noise, relief. The longs are getting out of the market. And I think that you're going to see a big bounce in oil prices as we move forward. You have record low inventories around the world. Strategic reserves have been run dry. I think Trump said that we were maybe 3 or 4 weeks away from being tapped out ourselves. So there's a lot of demand coming. Plus, there's going to be a risk premium built into the oil market. Nobody has any idea now what's going to happen. Even Trump keeps saying that, the bombs could be dropping at any minute. This MOU is really not real. We're just trying to keep oil prices down for a while, right? I mean, basically telling Iran not even to trust us. that we're not even serious. This is all politics. We're just trying to keep oil prices down for the summer driving season. So there's going to be all sorts of political pressure on the Fed not to hike rates and tremendous pressure to cut. Anyway, got a quick commercial break, so stick around. I'm coming right back. Small business owners are getting squeezed from every direction. Labor costs are rising, software subscriptions keep climbing, and margins keep getting thinner every quarter. Here is what most people miss. You're probably paying for 4 or 5 different tools that don't even talk to each other. One for project management, another for time tracking, another for invoicing. Each one takes a bite out of your bottom line every single month, and none of them gives you a clear picture of where your time and your money are actually going. That's why I want to tell you about Odoo. Odoo is a fully integrated business suite, a single platform that handles project management, timesheets, invoicing, accounting, all of it working together as one system to take the heavy lifting off your shoulders and let you focus on what matters. Think about what that actually means in practice. Your team logs their hours against a project. Those billable hours flow straight into a client invoice with one click. There are no spreadsheets to maintain, no numbers to chase, and no leakage between disconnected tools. You can see exactly where every task stands, who is working on what is profitable, and what is not. That is not a feature for the sake of features. That is the kind of visibility a serious business needs to make sound decisions. And here's the part that got my attention. The core apps are completely free. You can start using Odoo Project and Odoo Timesheets today without paying a dime. In an environment where every business expense deserves scrutiny, that is a hard offer to argue with. If you want to see what I'm talking about, go to odoo.com/r/Peter. That's odoo.com/r/Peter. You can also book a free consulting session with an Odoo expert for advice. The link is in the description, and there is a QR code on your screen. odoo.com/r/Peter. Now, I spent a lot of time on last week's podcast, which, by the way, on my YouTube channel, we got over 220,000 views, most viewed regular podcast that I've ever done. So a lot of people take Bitcoin, strategy, stretch. And so what happened following that podcast, instead of the death spiral accelerating on Monday, Michael Saylor found a way to temporarily stop the bleeding by pretty much doing exactly what I said he was going to have to do. And that was start selling Bitcoin, which is what he's going to do. Now, he hasn't sold any yet. What he did do is not buy any. A lot of people thought he was going to be buying Bitcoin over the weekend under 60,000. He did not do that. Instead, he sold more strategy common stock at a discount and raised the cash that he has available to pay his commitments in, mainly for now, in dividends on the preferred. And on stretch, he raised the dividend from 11.5% to 12%. So this increases the amount of cash that strategy needs to meet the obligations on the preferred. So they raised more cash, but what he did is he established what he called a Bitcoin monetization fund, which I thought was a bit ironic because he thinks Bitcoin is money. But this is an acknowledgement that it's not money because he needs to monetize it first. He has to turn his Bitcoin into money by selling it. And there are 3 reasons now that strategy is going to be selling Bitcoin. One is to raise more money for its dollar reserve. And by the way, they now have established a minimum dollar reserve. And so when the dollar reserve falls below this minimum, I forget what the threshold is, but now they have to bring it up. How are they going to bring it up? They're going to sell Bitcoin in order to maintain the dollar reserve. And it's going to keep depleting if they have to keep on jacking up the dividends. So that's one. And they authorized up to $1.25 billion of Bitcoin sales. $1.25 billion. Remember, he sold 32 Bitcoin for a few million bucks and tanked the market. Imagine having to sell that much Bitcoin. But there's even more because there's 2 more reasons